Let's see which is the nicer.
At this time, I'd like to call the Monday, October 8th, 2012 Planning Commission meeting to order. First item on the agenda is roll call. Pidd, here. McCusker.
Here.
Bauer.
Here.
Price. Absent. Longton.
Here.
Hema.
Here.
And Duden.
Here.
Welcome, Kurt.
Thank you.
The next item is the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Got a motion by Tim,
Second.
second by Leroy. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to the approval of the minutes from the September 10th, 2012 Planning Commission meeting.
So moved. Second.
Got a motion by Tim and a second by Leroy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is public input. Citizens may speak to issues not on the agenda. Before speaking, please give your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Anybody here for something other than the Casey's General Store? Seeing none, we'll close that portion. And that brings us to the public hearing for Casey's General Store.
All for Casey's? Thank you.
Oh, okay. I guess.
Thank you. Turn it off. Thank you. Public hearing tonight before the Planning Commission relates to a couple of zoning issues. One is the conditional use permit, which is required in a B2 district, a B2 commercial district, general business district, for a convenience store of this type that offers fuel and gas and convenience store items. So it is required to be reviewed as a conditional use permit. And secondarily, there's a request for a couple of variance proposals relating to setback requirements under the zoning ordinance and some landscaping yard requirements also required in the zoning ordinance. So we've got the conditional use permit and a couple of variances, but we'll deal with them all in one public hearing process. As is always the case, we've published in the Beacon notice of this particular meeting this evening, and we've also mailed notice to everyone within about 1 block of the proposed development site, and I do see some residents here tonight. I have received in writing a memorandum from Larry Dammer, who's here tonight. I've provided a copy to each one of you expressing some suggestions, concerns that he has as the immediate neighbor to the east. Those are the only comments that I received in advance of the public hearing in writing, so you each have a copy of that. Joni Dyer is here tonight too, representing Casey's. She has additional information, photographs, etc., maybe some information that wasn't included within the packet that I provided to you. So she's certainly here as a resource tonight should we have any questions as we go through the public hearing process. You know, Bill, maybe if we could get lights off usually help. I think everyone here tonight is familiar with the proposed site location for Casey's. Maybe that's there we go, shows up a little bit better. Included, this aerial photography was included in the packet for the Planning Commission. The site is less than 1 acre in size. It's obviously bounded in the red on this particular aerial map. It's served as a convenience gas station for many, many years. It has also been closed for several years. And Casey's General Stores has had an interest in purchasing this property, totally clearing the property for redevelopment and building a new Casey's General Store on the site. I'm going to refer to information on the screen for the Planning Commission and public, but I'm also going to provide, because it might be useful for the public, just provide a larger copy of what I'll be sharing with the Planning Commission, just so that they can get a little bit closer look of of the proposed site. What you see up on the screen is exactly that in a little bit smaller version. I know it's not all going to show up here. No, just barely. Existing Highway 19 to the north of the site, maybe I'll do it this way. To the north of the site, there are existing non-curbed access points into this property that have been there for many, many years. As part of the Casey's proposal, there will be a 32-foot wide driveway again on both ends of this site, but there will be curb and gutter to provide drainage control and traffic control accessing the site. We've also asked Casey's to move the western access as far to the west as they possibly can to more directly line up with Dow Street on the other side of 19. So we'll have more of a controlled, I guess, traffic pattern in that location. So that has been moved somewhat to the west from its existing location. The proposal coming south then is this is a canopy here, a traditional canopy that you'll see in most convenience stores. Underneath this particular canopy, there's 8 locations, 4 on each side for gasoline. Moving south into the site, of course this doesn't get around the arm well. Moving south to the site, towards the rear of the existing property is a little bit less than a 4,000 square foot Casey's General Store here. This is where the existing building to be demolished sits. And this is the new store at the back of or the near back of the site. In addition, as I said, to a conditional use permit being required, there are a couple of variance requests along with the application. One is that while this is zoned B2 general business and has been for a number of years, south of that and to the east, southeast of this site, is residentially zoned property. And the B2 district requires a 30-foot rear yard setback for properties that back up to residentially zoned property. So in this case, Casey's has applied to set their building back, let's call it roughly 17 feet as opposed to 30 feet from the rear yard required setback. Now, I'm sure you've all been out to the site or familiar with the site. There's a fair amount of woods and topography as you go south. Whether it's 30 feet or 17 feet or 18 feet or 20 feet, I would say in this case, even though there is residentially zoned and used property to the south of this, there's a reasonable existing buffer in terms of natural topography and some woodlands. But there is a request for a setback variance here on the back. Also, in the front yard here and the rear yard here, there's also a requirement for green space and turfed setback areas, landscaped areas, if you will. In the front yard, it's 15 feet, and in the rear yard, it's 20 feet. As I said, the building is not going to have a 20-foot backyard, so there is a requirement for a variance to the landscaped rear yard because of the zoning requirements. And then, of course, in the front, for this type of use in this particular location, given the relative modest size of the site, there's no realistic way to achieve a 15-foot landscaped area in the front yard, not without giving up parking, maneuverability areas through the site, et cetera. So to accommodate what Casey's is hoping to develop here and the investment that they're proposing to make here, to accommodate that on this particular site is clearly difficult in terms of meeting some of those requirements. There's a 5-foot landscaped area here, but there's not a 15-foot landscaped area here. So there's a variance request on the front, the north side of the property, a variance request on the south side, the rear of the property. Other than those issues, as I've gone through a couple of sets of site plans with Casey's, there's been modifications along the way as they've submitted them to me. I think everything else is in compliance with the main conditions of our zoning ordinance in the B2 and the additional requirements for a fuel station in a B2 district. There's some details yet to be presented in terms of storm drainage, some details relative to landscaping, still having some conversation with Casey's in terms of permit requirements under MPCA, et cetera, for underground fuel tanks, et cetera. And I'm confident that we'll work those issues out. But it has been kind of an evolving site plan, and I guess I'm comfortable at this point that if we're going to go ahead with this kind of use or reuse of this property for this particular proposal, that given the site is the site, it is what it is, and it is a little bit of a challenge to fit this kind of operation in today's development standards on a site that has these particular configurations and dimensions on the site. So I think the variance request certainly makes some sense to me, at least in terms of making the proposal to the Planning Commission and Council. Also included within the materials is the variance request narrative that Casey's provided to you. Again, for maybe everybody but Kurt now, we have gone through a few variance applications since the state changed the law, and we talked about that when we met a little bit. And now it's not a matter of hardship, it's a matter of are there practical difficulties that would support the recommendation from the Planning Commission to approve variance requests, whether they're the ones I'm suggesting that have been applied for here or otherwise. So if there are practical difficulties, the Planning Commission can recommend and the Council can accept variance proposals, provided that you agree that there's practical difficulties. And this is a representation from Casey's talking about the variances and the practical difficulties. There's sign application request. The sign application proposals do meet the minimum standards as required under our sign ordinance, so I have not included those with the packet for purposes of sharing with the public. There's a couple of signs that are proposed for this project. There's wall signs on the building, and I'm sure Joey's got copies of that if you'd like to look at that. And then there's also a proposed monument sign that looks like this. That's located out on the kind of the northeast corner of the site. Here's Mr. Dammer's building here. Here's the new Casey's down here, the existing building. So the sign that I just showed you, the monument sign, is proposed to be out in this location. And in that location and with the sizes that they're proposing, they do comply with the minimum requirements of our sign ordinance. I think the signs are at least compliant in terms of what's been presented, but I did want to show those to the Planning Commission for your information. You can sit if you'd like me to hand those out. I can do that and then allow you to add or expand on any comments that I've made. I'm just going to hand these out. I'll put one up on the screen here so you can see it, but these are the new prototype exteriors of the Casey stores that we're looking at, and I'll hand out the rest. You can pass them down to get an idea of what the buildings or the building itself will look like. But an attractive building, again, will meet our minimum requirements for exterior buildings in this particular location, so I have no particular problem with that.
Dave, what is happening at the back? That's the 16-foot 7? Well, I don't
Pretty much.
understand what is, you're saying that there's supposed to be 20 feet of green, but
Yep,
I don't understand by what I'm seeing here, what is happening there?
good question. Wouldn't you know? There we go. Here's the back or the south edge of the building line. Here's the south property line. Here's some existing vegetation, existing trees located here and along on the west side. But that's basically proposed, Mark, just to be a landscaped green area.
Okay.
Now there are, on the east and southeast side of the building, a proposed retaining wall. I'm waiting for the details on exactly what the elevations are to require a retaining wall in that location. You're familiar, in back of Mr. Dahmer's building here, there's already existing retaining walls there because this does come up, the grades are quite steep in that location. So there is some retaining walls proposed at Casey's in this location, and then, and then over here on the west side. And those details will be forthcoming with the grading plan and the drainage plan. So again, the areas the landscaped area is going from the west, northwest, coming south here, back around the building. This is green area in here too, but back around the building, and then going back over along the east side, all the way back up to the highway, are basically landscape boulevard areas. The concern that Mr. Dahmer has expressed is wanting to control traffic movements back and forth between the two properties here, also control the debris and garbage and those type of things that tends to come from convenience stores and has a way of finding its way across the neighbor's yard, controlling that. And then also from prior experience, I know that as people have stopped to use the now former convenience store, if they've had pets or whatever, they get out and about. And so there's a real, I think, a legitimate concern by the neighbor to work with Casey's through this process to come up with some reasonable means of preventing, discouraging, eliminating any kind of crossover traffic that shouldn't be crossing over between the two sites. And I have, as I said, spoken with Casey's about that. They're very willing to work with us on that. We don't have the final details, but I've explained to Mr. Dahmer that if this does go ahead from the Planning Commission and it does get recommended for approval to the council, that resolving his particular concerns would be a part of the development itself. Because I think that is a legitimate concern, and I'm guessing the commission does too. So, any further questions?
Is there utility access to the back or to the south side of that building?
Utility access, sewer and water?
I mean, you can't drive back there. Is
No,
it going to be
not
paved?
from down here you cannot.
So there's, is there a way of getting in there for any reason?
To the rear of the Casey's store?
Yeah.
Not unless there's
No.
access to the back, door access, but no.
It's on the side.
It's on the side?
There's no access to the back of the building.
Okay.
How wide is that on the west side between the building and the power company there?
10 feet
10 feet?
in this area, between the curb. Yep, from the curb to the west property line is 10
The
foot
east
1
side
inch.
has got roughly how many feet?
It's got 10 foot 1 inch on the east side as well. So it's a
Okay.
10 foot wide green area is basically what it is.
Right, so basically it's not gonna be accessible from the back or from the front to get to the back. I guess I'm just thinking about fire.
Okay. Yeah, the trucks here in this instance would be, the size of the building and the location of the building would be a front-ended load on for
Right.
fire. Yep. Yeah, so the only way to get there from the back would be, in terms of fire protection, would be in the lower parking lot of the Dahmer building here. Oops, here. And then up the hill.
Okay. Were you done, Bruce?
That's what I was thinking about, yeah.
Okay. I got some questions for you, Dave,
Okay.
unless you want to let her speak first.
I'll try.
Okay,
Happy to do that.
Okay. Joni Dyer with Casey's.
welcome, thank you.
Thank you. Glad to be here. And what was the question again?
Oh, the ones that I had, some of them are for Dave, some of them are for you. The one thing, there is a couple storm drains in the back, and you brought that up, Dave. And of course, they're probably not gonna be needed if that's gonna be a green area. But I was concerned because I don't know if they just dump over the hill and dump onto the street, or where they go.
And we'll be all curbed. All of
Right.
our is curbed, so nothing goes out of the parking area.
Yeah,
In the
actually,
back.
where these are is in the back, though. It's way in the back of the lot. It, gotta put that map up there, I can point out where they are. It's just something that Tom should be aware of. To the back of the building there, if you go where your finger is there,
Yep,
there is,
right there.
there's one to the left of your finger a little bit. Probably over by the zeros on the 210. There's a storm sewer dump back there right now. And then if you go over, move your finger to the right, go all the way over to the corner and around the corner a little bit, there's another one that dumps right there. And I think they're probably dumping out the back, so it's just something that we need to be aware of in the plans. And I looked at them, of course, they're full of leaves, so they more than likely wouldn't work anyway. The other concerns I had for you, and I guess first of all, I wanted to thank you for considering Cannon Falls for your investment and the location, and I want to make sure to welcome you and thank you for
Thank you.
considering Cannon Falls. The other thing is, if there's going to be any lighting in the back, I would like to see the lighting angled forward away from the housing area.
If there is, it will be downward, just a security light, and that's just to maintain security behind the building, because it is rather protected back there, and you don't want anything bad going on back there.
Right.
But the security is on the side by the door, the side door. Once we get an approval for the conditional use and the variance, then we will submit the full set of prints, and every sheet has probably exactly what you're gonna look at
Right.
on it. You do, but do you have the full set yet? Okay.
I also have the same concerns that your neighbors do. It is a big thing for people. It's amazing to me that stop at the gas station, not only fill up with gas, they walk the dog.
Particularly along a highway, yeah.
It's really amazing. I just want to emphasize the concerns of the neighbor. I also know that clear back 30 years ago, another gas station we had in town, the neighbors always had problems with trash drifting. And it's just one of those things that goes with the gas station. I understand people don't go out there and necessarily throw towels around, but it's a windy day and one gets away and it's going over the neighbors. So I would be concerned that whatever you can do to fence that border and maybe fence it clear to the ground to make a catch basin, and your staff needs to walk that fence at night and pick it up.
And we do have in our operational procedure, I live by a Casey's. So I know, and there's no fence around mine. I know what you're talking about, but our operations, in the operations manual and everything, they're to go out, I think, every hour or every 2 hours and pick up the trash.
Right. And then we're also, I think all of us aware of that this is an investment property, and we're glad about the tax base. We're glad somebody's moving in and gonna pay us taxes again. And we also understand that this is about making money off a square foot of property, and you need to use what you can and what works. And we certainly want to do whatever it takes to make this possible for you to work right. The green area in back, I was a little bit surprised by that, Dave. I thought maybe they would have a unloading area back there or something. So I think that's really kind of a good thing. The good thing is all the storm drains will go to Highway 19, so I don't think that's gonna be a big problem for us versus if we had to get storm drains in that back or something. So I think the green area actually ends up being kind of a plus for the city.
I would agree, in this instance. Given the limitations of this site for what they're hoping to do, and again, doing it under 2006 standards with our new ordinance versus what was done there before, it's a whole different ballgame, and we certainly understand that, you know, we could say, well, you can only have 3 parking spaces and the rest is gonna be green, and guess what? There's not gonna be an investment. So there's gotta be some give and take, and like I say, so far, I think, as we've worked this through with Casey's, there has been give and take, and I think what we're seeing today is a pretty good reflection of something that fits reasonably well on that site. I mean, in terms of how we look at it.
Yeah, the only other thing we'd say is that I'm glad you're thinking about this, glad you're thinking about investing in Cannon Falls. We welcome corporate investment. We also are looking for corporate partners in Cannon Falls, not corporate takers.
Right.
So when our city has little things going on and we need support and stuff, we're looking to work together. We can do a lot of things with corporate America when they work with us.
Sure.
It can be a challenge when it goes the other way.
No, we
So-
are good corporate citizens.
Thank you very much, and that was my question.
Okay. We have looked at Cannon Falls a lot. You have a little difficult town in order to build in. The elevations are not flat. It's hard to find a big square area that's flat. where you want it to be. So we're thrilled to death to find this. And just to explain the site plan a little bit, we have dimensions that we need to have, because we've learned the hard way. If you notice, the Northfield store is just tiny, tiny. We like to have 65 feet in between the building and the pumps, and then the 40 feet between the pumps and the curb. And these are head-end pumps, so they require a little bit more space in between in order to get everybody moving around and they don't back into somebody that's at the store or whatever. So there's a lot of thought that's been, and like I said, I wish it was bigger, but it's not. So,
Thank you.
mhm. Any other questions?
I was actually just gonna make a suggestion. I don't know what Casey's philosophy is on fence types or whatever. I understand what Leroy's saying, but I think maybe instead of a fence, maybe there's some kind of a bush that would take up some of that 10-foot space that you could plant close enough so it would actually catch the debris, but it would actually be green. You'd have more vertical green space then to help accommodate for what you're not getting in the front and the backyard.
And we're not opposed to greenery, but 10 feet isn't very wide. If you'd have a spruce or something that is a year-round greenery, which is, I think is what you'd want,
Right.
they get a lot wider than the 10-foot area. I think they'd overgrow themselves and maybe wouldn't make it. Pardon?
Say greenery would never work. You know, you have seasonal problems, you know, with dryness and so on, and if people can find a crack, they'll make it bigger. You know, between bushes and things like that. It needs to be a fence.
And we're not opposed to a fence. We just asked that it not be going all the way to the property line out front, because that's a
Right.
visibility hazard.
Right, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would think that they would be kind of counterproductive to try and go further up.
What are your hours are you thinking right now?
We'll start off, I believe, with 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. are our normal hours. And I don't know if they'll go 24 hours. We have started doing that by interstates, but I don't know what that would bring. I think it depends, it's all site-specific.
Yeah.
Why don't you step on up so everybody can hear you? No, she's scared. It's okay, nobody bites. Except maybe Dave there, but,
I haven't seen anybody bit yet. I'll see that. You can sign in here too.
yeah.
If you
I'm-
pull the mic over for her, Dave. There you go.
I can do that. I'm Glenda Cooper, and I live right behind Dammers on Floyd. And my front yard is facing Dammers' lower parking lot. So Casey's would be right up here from me. And I am for something going in there because it seems to be a kids' hangout. And they seem to paint the back of the station now, and it gets repainted, and they paint the back of my garage, and it gets repainted. Mine and my neighbors were a duplex. There's 2 up and 2 down. And my question was, are the gas tanks that are originally there going to be taken out?
Yes.
Good.
She said
That's
yes.
That's good. And also, I was wondering, since the residential area is on the southeast, why the garbage can't be on the southwest, since there's no houses over there to smell it? The dumping area, it's the recycling area, and that. Why can't it be over by the electrical plant instead of over by the residential and Dammers area? Because, I mean, they have the people that were there before have a partition up there, but people at night or trucks or whatever, if you will look in the woods below their garbage place, it's full of tires and garbage that have been thrown there for years. And like Leroy said, they've had complaints, and nobody's ever come and picked it up. So I was just wondering why the recycling thing couldn't be at the other end. And is there going to be a lot of fill in that back?
Not a lot of fill. We
Good.
haven't done the grading plan yet, but that's partially why there's a retaining wall there.
Mhm.
It's to kind of even it out back there.
Okay.
And to answer your question about the dumpster area,
Uh-huh.
if you look on the other side of the building, the way the insides are done, that other side is where the loading dock is.
Oh, I see.
And the loading, I don't think you'd want the loading dock on your side either. And
No.
the dumpster is brick enclosed
Oh, good.
with lid on the dumpsters.
Oh, good.
So it's so much nicer than they used to be.
Okay,
But that's why it's on that side and not on that side.
okay. And I think that having a light up at night would be great, because the only light that I have for seeing anybody up in the station area is Mr. Dammer leaves a light on sometimes in his building, and then the street light up where you turn to go to the hospital. And you can see kids up in there and doing smoking or whatever. And I think it would be, to have a security light would be a good idea back there. And that is my front yard, so is there, as far as noise-wise,
Oh, it shouldn't be noisy
That's what I
back there at
thought.
all.
Yeah.
In fact, the building should kind of
Be
be
a
a
block.
buffer for you
That's
for
good.
what's going on at the front of the store.
I think it's an excellent company. I came from Iowa, and there's a lot of Casey's in Iowa, and a lot of my friends own Casey's, so they're a very clean establishment, so I am for having something there, and I'm glad Casey's is going there, so that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think maybe Tony can keep that in consideration, that she's thinking about the security in the back of the building, or some lighting back there that stays on at night or something. Hopefully that doesn't become an issue because you no longer can drive back there and stuff, but maybe keep that in consideration.
Yeah, we want it safe,
Right,
but you won't be able to drive back there. There's no access back there
Right.
at all.
but as far as kids,
Oh,
that's the thing, you know, we don't know what happens there. Somebody else wanted,
There is now.
oh, yeah, well, there is a drive back there, yeah.
somebody else wanted to speak, Dan. Yeah.
I'm Larry Demmer. I do own the building to the east of this proposal. I've given you some ideas about the fence and so on, and I understand that that has to be negotiated, or designs and so on have got to be chosen. I do think that a fence is going to be really the only issue there, because it's amazing. People will come up from the bottom parts and so on, and they'll park there, and they will get through there if there's not a fence there. And one of the other concerns I guess I would have is the signage for the station seems to be about in the middle of the parking lot that I have on my building. And I think mention was made about not extending this fence beyond that sign. And I guess that concerns me a little bit, because if you don't extend it past that monument sign there, there's, you know, every possibility that people will be parking on my lot there and going around to the station. And I guess I'm wondering about whether that sign can be extended out further towards the road, or if there can be some fencing or something that might deter the traffic there. I'm sure there are, Dave mentions.
I think primarily the concern with moving a sign or a fence too close to the road is the visibility. You want as much visibility as possible.
Visibility of the sign?
He's
No,
talking about
No,
the
of the
backside.
Driving
street.
in and out.
You put those steel posts in, you know, every few feet so cars and stuff can't get through.
Well, he's talking
He's
about
talking about
mostly
people with their dogs.
people who come and park in his lot and then walk through there
Okay.
with their dog, or they'll walk their dog and come down across his parking lot or something.
What about a raised planter or something along those lines? I mean, you got 10 feet of green. Could you do a raised planter on the edge of it? And
Is that fence, Dave, gonna come pretty much even with the building all the way to the highway, or as far as we can let it go out?
How high does the fence
That's
have to
kind of
be?
the issue here.
If it's 2 feet
is-
high, is that enough?
No.
The sign ordinance allows this sign to be moved another 5 feet north. It has to be set back 15 feet.
Right.
Now, there's a gas main in here as we move up into this area, so I think part of the reason for the sign being where it is, it was moved off of that gas main. But it could legally be moved 15 feet to the north, but there's still then gonna be, within 15 feet, there's still gonna be an open area here, and this is kind of an at-grade parking access now, or parking lot now. So coming across, I'm not sure what the final elevations will be here, but they're probably gonna be reasonably similar. So
But can that be like 2.5 feet or something, a fence there that you can see over and it would still catch?
as I say, is the sign that they've got, I don't know, Joni, what this distance is here of the brick, well, it's 2 feet. So there's a 2-foot brick pedestal down below, so I suppose there could be an extension somehow, you know, of a 2-foot high structure coming out towards the highway, could be landscaped, I mean, some way to figure that out and prevent at least vehicular movement. And for pedestrian, I suppose if they wanted to step up and step over and step down, they could get through. But there's probably a way that the folks who know these things could look at that and see maybe there's a way of extending that into this area to prevent the movement there. Here, going south, that can probably be easily handled with fence.
Right.
But going towards the highway, it's a little bit difficult, and we can't go beyond this line. That's the highway right-of-way line, so we can't go out into here.
Right.
So there's visibility issues, there's,
You'll see all kinds of traffic. Snowmobiles, another thing, four-wheelers, they'll go around that corner. I mean,
Right.
it's close to that sign, you know, so it's just gonna happen. I've been up there for 30 years, and I've seen absolutely everything go through there, so. So, there's gotta be a solution. I guess all I'm asking is that some attention be paid to that issue.
I mean, it's a possibility you can post 3 foot on center and just paint a post. I mean, it's something that would leave the visibility and then stop that crossing from happening, so. You know, she's aware of that, Dave's aware of that. We're certainly gonna
Is
take
it
that in consideration.
pedestrian you're worried about, or cars going across there? Because cars will not be able to go back and forth there. And a person, we've got quite a few parking spaces. We've got 8 at the pumps, and then we've got 16 or so. I mean, we have,
16 in front.
we should be so lucky that there's that many people
Well,
there.
normally that's the case, but when you get, when you get wintertime up there and it drifts up there, pretty soon it looks, everything looks like a parking lot there. So anything that's on the outer part of that sign is gonna become,
But they won't be able to pull up there. There's curbing and stuff, that nobody will be able to pull up there.
yes, but when it snows, it flattens out. I mean, the curb disappears. And so it's still
I guess we've never
encourages.
had that problem, people popping the curb, going over to a neighbor's.
Yeah, well, it's happened. I've had them drive off the end of my parking lot, and that's about a 6-foot descent down to the road, so, I mean, it will happen. It will happen.
We've never had that happen.
Some things become a police issue too. I mean, we can try to do the right things, and then it gets to be, if you get too many things like that happening, you gotta start calling the police. I mean, you just,
Well,
we
the problem
can't have
is,
that
you know,
happening.
a lot of times it's at night, or it's weekends, or things
Right.
when
I
you're around.
understand.
We police it when we're there at business hours, you know, obviously, and discourage use. The other thing is, you know, it's, there's always the issue of people heading for the Twin Cities, and they say, well, there's Casey's, that's pretty good, we'll meet there. Geez, I don't want to park my car, there's kind of busy there, I'll park it on this next lot there, closed, and they'll just leave it.
I can see that.
That's happened many times. They'll leave it on my lot, you know, well, tax season wise, at least we're working 6 days a week, and sometimes I'm working 7 days out there. But the thing is, you know, I just don't want to, we're plowing lots and stuff, and we don't want traffic parked out there for any length of time to be able to do that, you know, so there's that kind of issue that does happen, and this is the time to, with a little bit of planning, to prevent that. my issue. The other thing with respect to the garbage being on that end, that, you know, concerns me a little bit. I'm sure the volume will be much greater in a Casey store, you know, with all kinds of foodstuffs and everything else that are going to wind up in that garbage can. And, you know, so that's a little bit of a concern to me. The dumpster area has been in that particular location of this lot for years. You know, so it's, I really don't know what you could do with that, but, you know, I know the volume will be higher. So I don't know if there's other things that just prevent that on the other building. Yeah, so be it, I guess. But those are the concerns I had, so I think that's it.
Thank you.
Is there any other input?
Do we need a motion on this, Dave?
Yep,
You gotta close the
ready to
public
close the hearing and move on to the resolution 2012-11. And with the now therefore be it resolved, just so you understand and we can clarify it even more if you wish, is when we talk about the landscaping, that's this side yard issue, the rear issues, the whole landscaping of the site, including any fencing. So that's where that's found in this resolution.
Any further discussion? Do I have a motion?
Close the hearing.
Oh, right. This time I'd like to close the public hearing for Casey's General Store. And that brings us to discussion item resolution 2012-11 Casey's General Store. Is there any further discussion? Do I have a motion?
I make a motion that we move ahead with this as long as Dave and neighbors can all have the goal to work towards what we want and the fences, and whatever we discuss there tonight.
You're saying to at least consider a review of fence on that east side,
Yep,
or some sort of barrier.
yeah.
Okay.
Mostly a debris barrier.
And I think if you could provide an operational manual too, that would be helpful.
Okay. Well, only so far I can go with the
Yeah,
operation.
I understand. I understand. I don't want it all.
Okay.
Pertinent sections that deal with the issues we're talking about here would be helpful.
We had a motion by Leroy and a second by Price. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you.
That brings us to item 7B, which is dynamic sign regulations.
The only thing to report on that is since the conversation we had at the last meeting, I have gone back into the sign ordinance, trying to again make this administratively simple and hopefully a usable set of guidelines that the public can understand and use in the event that they want to use this kind of signage or request this kind of signage in the city. So I think we'll be able to find some language that responds to our last conversation, and I'll keep working on it as time permits. But I think we'll get there. That's all I have on dynamic signs.
Okay.
All right, that brings us to number 7C, which is moratorium planning ordinance number 315.
Commission will recall that earlier this year, the City Council established a development moratorium for the areas basically shown, we'll call it gold, blue, and then green down on the bottom. The gold areas are the areas that are currently zoned B2 general business. The blue areas are zoned currently industrial, and the green area on the south side is zoned urban reserve. That was the piece that was annexed a couple of years ago, and we're still waiting for the developer to submit us a zoning request, a development proposal to respond to. But that area in the gold, blue, and green was established as a area subject to development moratorium for the current year, giving us some time to kind of catch up with what's going on out in that area from a development perspective. The biggest single issue, of course, being Highway 52 and the interchange project, what's evolved into a change with respect to the timing of the construction of the overpass in that location. Again, MnDOT's telling us that it's in the plan, but it's not funded right now, so 2019 would be the earliest that we would expect to see some type of potential construction on the overpass. So that's kind of evolved with the process this year to a better understanding. We've also had a chance at a staff level to meet with Cannon Falls Town Board. You don't see it so much on this plan, but if you look at the plan up on the wall behind me, the yellow roads outside of the interchange, the yellow roads on the east side, which is the bottom of the page, and the west side, the top of the page, those roads are secondary roads that are going to be constructed in conjunction with the interchange to serve the interchange, but those roads are currently located in Cannon Falls Township. They're not in the city of Cannon Falls. So one of the reasons why we sought to kind of slow down the process was to get a little bit better understanding, in this case from Cannon Falls Township, about what they were viewing in terms of the Highway 52 project, the secondary roads, their growth, as well as our growth. That is, were they interested in annexing some or all these properties as a result of these roads being built to handle the Highway 52 project. We've had a chance to meet with the town board, and the position of the town board to representative staff has been that at this point they're not seeking, they're not requesting, they're not proposing that the city of Cannon Falls annex all those properties in and around those secondary roads, those yellow roads on the back wall, but rather that the town board will take over the responsibility for maintenance and the investments required to operate those roads in the future. So they'll stay in the township for now. That's not to say that they would never be annexed in the future, but our understanding with the town board at this point is that they're not suggesting and we're not proposing that we annex all those areas now. In the future, if a property owner wished to have the properties annexed, they can certainly petition the city. The town board can have a participation at that point, and the city of Cannon Falls would have to decide whether or not to annex them at that time if they were petitioned. So we wanted to get that clarified because, again, in terms of this moratorium, if all of the areas around that are serviced by those roads were going to be annexed to the city of Cannon Falls, it's a lot of land and a lot of issues that comes along with that land to be annexed. So at this point, we've at least received the understanding from the township that there's not going to be an immediate annexation of those properties. We needed to have that clarified. Because at the same time, we also had the city engineer look at those yellow roads and provide some cost estimates to the city of Cannon Falls to service those areas with new sewer water utilities. And there's a fair amount of expense associated with that, money that the city council is not prepared, doesn't have available to spend at this time. So knowing that we weren't going to annex those properties right now and understanding what the cost would be to serve those areas with utilities, I guess I would say we're somewhat relieved that we're not going to have to face those costs at the present time because we're just not prepared to do that. So we've gotten that information provided to us. We've also begun more actively in the last couple of months to work with the hospital and their plans for their development. And they're still planning on starting construction of their new facility early next year or April or so of next year. So I think those plans have evolved more beyond just they're going to do a new hospital to actually beginning to submit us some preliminary plans that show us the size, the scope, and what the building is going to look like on the site. So we've now received a little bit more information from them. So I think some of the questions that we had earlier this year that led to the council establishing the moratorium have been at least partially answered or more answered than they were at the time when the moratorium was established. And so we want to go forward with terminating the moratorium at the end of this year. It's a one-year life to a moratorium like this. We'd like to end that moratorium planning period at the end of this year. But to do that, we first want to have some conversation with the Planning Commission. Planning Commission will be asked to make some recommendations to the City Council. City Council will have to accept those recommendations, and if they do, we can end the moratorium at least at this particular time. So that's just a little bit of background. What I'm recommending to the Commission tonight, and I'm worried about, yeah, these just don't. Don't come through very clearly on this, unfortunately. So I apologize to you because this isn't going to be all that meaningful. You're not going to see this too well. Within the packets, this is a map. Whoops, this is a map that I provided to you called Planning Study Ordinance number 315. What I'm suggesting to the Commission in terms of moving forward is that much of the existing lay of the land out in the Highway 52 corridor at this point under this planning study would more or less stay the way it is. To take on the issues that are associated with the use of those existing properties and to go back into our B2 zoning district and to really put all those things together is a pretty substantial undertaking. I'm not sure it's in our best interest right now to do that. But what I am interested in doing, and the recommendation I'm making to the Commission tonight, is that the area in and around the hospital site, which includes some of the property that they recently purchased on the east end of the original property that they owned, which now comprises the hospital site, that there's about 60 acres of land in there, including the hospital site, and 3 existing parcels located along existing County 24. There's one vacant piece of property. Randy Retzikel owns some buildings here, and then of course Grandpa's Garage. So there's those 3 parcels, and all the rest of the land is currently owned by the hospital, or that's where the hospital would be built. It's about 60 acres total, and I think to respond to the moratorium and to maybe move some planning conversation forward and maybe even some zoning rewrites forward for the hospital and that 60 acres, given its topography, some of the woodland areas there, some of the existing development that's already occurred and what the hospital is proposing to do, I think it is a tremendous opportunity to not only assist the hospital in locating, their investment on that site, but I think that will also generate some other market opportunities for additional complementary developments in and around the hospital site. And I think this 60 acres, given its topography and the fact that it's bounded or will be bounded by at least 3 roads when the county completes the southeast collector through this area, it's going to be bounded by existing roads on, well, all 4 sides, I guess, to a certain degree. But it's going to be accessible by 4 roads. There's utilities in the area. There's some nice amenity to the site. The hospital is going to be a significant development on that property. And I think for us to have what I'm calling a planned development zone or a medical zone or whatever district we want to call it, would make some good sense in terms of taking that recommendation forward and making some changes, not just to our comprehensive plan, but also to some of our zoning provisions so that we can actually implement this development in the future. So what we're recommending is that we modify the comprehensive plan to change it from a public use designation area under the 2003 comprehensive plan to more of a planned development zoning concept, which obviously would be anchored by a medical facility, but there would be additional development opportunities in and around that site that could be complementary, and make this area, the 60-acre area, a site which would have a little bit larger lots, maybe be a little bit more complementary to existing topography, would be more higher value properties over time. It wouldn't change any of the existing development that's there. That would be brought in as potentially non-conforming. But over time, I think there are higher and better uses for that property. And I think the hospital investment is going to drive a lot of that market demand as we go forward. So I think it is a somewhat unique opportunity, not that we don't have hills anywhere else in town, as we talked about earlier, but I think, again, with the investment that's going to occur out there, that this might be a good way for us to help not only improve that area as a result of the hospital developing there, but also to allow some additional complementary development opportunities to exist down the road with changes in our plan and our zoning. The other thing that would not be allowed here specifically, and this again is part of our development moratorium, would be the sexually oriented uses would not be allowed in this particular zone, which means that if they're going to be allowed in Cannon Falls, that they would still be potentially permitted in the B2 areas outside of this area, but they would not be permitted here. And that's part of our planning study as well.
Does that cover bars and
No.
everything?
No, that definition does not. That's a specific statutory definition which would be included in our documentation to preclude or exclude them from locating within this 60-acre area.
Oh, that 60-acre area, so basically, they bought or they own from the John Deere south, is that right? I mean, where the Grandpa's garage is there?
Here's Grandpa's garage here.
Right.
The hospital owns all this.
All this?
Yep.
Oh, but they don't own this?
Right.
Oh, okay,
Yep.
so they own around that?
Yep.
And,
this piece
and the
here.
white areas,
Those are existing gravel roads.
right,
Yep.
so with the hospital, what's our thinking? Are we gonna try to tie this road back in? If this isn't gonna happen in 2019 now?
This one won't.
Oh, okay,
Just
you're
that
talking
one.
this
That
one.
will. So this will be constructed as part of this
Okay,
energy. Yep.
okay, you're talking about the bridge by the Cannonball.
Yep.
All right,
See, 24 Leroy is the green stripe coming out the end of that
right.
second
Grandpa's garage is
roundabout
here and
and heading north.
John Deere has
That's
the
where
big lot.
24
Here's
is
the hospital
what
and
they're
all this.
planning for that.
This is the area
Yeah.
that they bought, and the new county road will come through like
It's
this.
gonna,
I'd show it on the overhead, but it's
gonna
too
come
hard
out
to see.
and run around here and go up.
Okay.
And then it's gonna go up to 25
That's
eventually.
Grandpa's garage here, and here's the John Deere vacant lot, Randy Rascal's property. The hospital owns all this. They purchased this. That's the area that would have to be annexed to the city, this piece here, but the hospital now owns that. And then at the end of this roundabout, forest, yeah.
I think they're planning on tying into here.
Yeah.
Up the hill.
With all that yellow out there, Dave, wow, there's, who's paying for all that development? A lot of that's gonna be in the township area, right?
Township.
This, I guess, yeah, the colors come up, okay, good. From the overpass here to this roundabout and the connection back to County 24 is all part of the Highway 52 project. We're contributing as a city, Goodhue County's contributing as a county, and MnDOT's contributing in a big way for the balance of the cost. But pretty much everything shown in yellow here, Leroy, is part of the project that will be bid and construction
Right.
begun next year.
Yeah, and I understand that, but I mean on the other side of the highway, with all them roads in the back there,
Over to here, that's
Yeah.
the same,
and coming all the way back
That's-
to 24.
that's the same. And then down here, I'm not sure if, I think they're still now at this point maybe just talking at least gravel, but I'm not sure. This is between the county and MnDOT, so we're not involved with this piece at all.
Oh, the county's taking care of that? That township ain't
Yeah.
involved in that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of new roads being built as a result of the interchange. And then what's called the Southeast Collector Road, which is again a county initiative, coming from the east roundabout here, back through here, that's all county. And
That's the one that I hope goes through. I think that's a very important road. I'd like to see it go all the way to the high school.
And they're talking now, Lisa County Board's talking about, I don't think there's any question it will come at least to 318, but probably up to 25 is where they're headed with this phase.
Right.
And then from 25 to 19 would be at some point in the future. But that's, I think their last estimate on that project, up to 25 was in that $7.5 million range, as I recall. That's just road.
Wow.
No utilities. So, all these things, like I say, since the beginning of this year are now starting to take a little bit more form, and we're getting a little bit better understanding of kind of who's doing what to whom and when. And again, what we want to do is be able to move beyond this moratorium period, see if we can at least get our arms around, you know, this 60-acre tract that I'm talking about, allow some things there that maybe are different from what the ordinance state, you know, could occur there at this time. But create a new development opportunity. There is going to be land around the hospital building itself that will be available for additional development. Now again, Mayo will own that at this point through the conversations, but there will be other development opportunities in and around that site. We are talking at the Economic Development Authority level about what we might do to kind of help foster and facilitate, you know, the kind of development that we'd like to see out there in and around the hospital. And if we need to, we've had those conversations at the EDA. We may very well find ourselves involved with that. So I think it's a good opportunity for us, at least on the Planning Commission and the City of Cannon Falls side, to kind of maybe have a little bit of a influence on what might happen in the future in and around that site. And I think there's some good opportunities, you know, for development, but we want to give a certain amount of flexibility for that to happen. But I think we want to maybe give it a little bit different twist than what our current ordinance allows.
Excuse me, did you say Mayo would own that land, or
Yeah.
the hospital will own the land?
Well, it'd be Mayo Health Systems, yeah. Mayo Clinic Health Systems.
Okay.
Or are we talking about letting the moratorium expire the first year, or is this what we're talking about, keeping it going, or what are we doing?
If we take a direction and we move this forward, if the Planning Commission, because this is where it would start, we would go through a recommendation to the City Council. We've got some ordinance adjustments to make. We would do that before the end of the year, and if we get to that point, then the moratorium could end.
Okay. And so far, with the one issue we dealt out there, basically, what did that take us, maybe 60 days?
With the Cannon Power Sports?
Yeah. to
Yeah.
get that worked through, so I mean, we can work through things if somebody's got something going.
Yeah, yeah. And we did that twice because they had two projects.
Right.
Yeah, what it takes right now, what Leroy's referring to is irrespective of this planning study, Cannon Power Sports, will use it as an example. They have now started the showroom addition to their building. In order for us to allow them to do that, the council had to amend the moratorium ordinance to permit that project. We also amended the ordinance to allow them to build the warehouse addition on the south side of their building, which is already done. So they've actually done two projects, both of which were required amendments to the moratorium ordinance for us to permit them, and we did that. So if anyone else has that this year, they can certainly come in and make application. We have to process it as an amendment to that ordinance.
Did I understand you right, Dave, that you're looking at the overpass not being started or done until 2019?
I'm not, but
That's the 24 overpass, that's not the
Yeah.
main.
That's a different one.
it's up here on the north end, Kurt.
By the northern stoplight.
It's just a
Yep.
bridge, actually.
That's
One-
just a bridge.
Cannonball.
Where it comes in front of the cannonball.
Yep.
there.
The other one's
Other
supposed to
overpass
start
is done.
15, right?
Next year,
Next year?
next year.
Okay, okay,
The main overpass is supposed to start next year.
yeah, okay.
Originally, it was all supposed to be bid and constructed as one project. The south interchange and the north overpass were to be done as one project, and due to funding limitations, MnDOT's removed the north overpass from the project. It won't be bid, it won't be built, and at best, they're talking 2019 for funding.
And my theory is, Kurt, that it'll probably never happen. once they get 2019, there's gonna be another budget issue or something else, and it'll get put off again.
And I'm not going to try to talk him out of that,
We
because I think he's probably right.
kind of discussed that when that happened, that it should probably been all part of the plan and should all been done at once, because I think it'll just get lost in the shuffle and probably never happen.
I agree.
And we may, as a planning commission, just to kind of forewarn you, we may be looking at some interim sign proposals, because even though the overpass isn't going to be built in 2019, or maybe never, who knows, the access onto 52 on the north end will be closed. So there will not be on or off traffic coming in its current location at the light. That will be eliminated. We know that there's a number of businesses, particularly on the north end, that are going to be impacted by this project no matter what. And even in the interim period, if they stay where they are, to get access from 52 to their properties is going to require, if you're going south, you're going to come down to the interchange and come back north. If you're going north, it's a little bit more of a problem, because you got to go up to 19 and come back south. So I think we're going to see a number of businesses coming in, talking first with me, and I'll be talking with you about how to deal with signage as a result of this significant change to Highway 52. Because our sign ordinance, it's not perfect, and it certainly didn't anticipate this kind of reality with the highway changing.
You know, the thing is too, Dave, have they given us roughly an estimate on how long it's gonna take from the time they start till it's done?
4 years.
Yes. They told us when they were going to bid it originally in January and start with construction as early the spring of next year. When they said that, they were talking about substantial completion 2013, cleanup in 2014. Now the bid date's been moved back some, and the start date also has been moved back some, because they have not yet acquired all the property they need to build this project. It's hard to know when they're going to have all the properties acquired to do this project, but my suspicion is now it's gone from we will start construction in 2013, and maybe we'll get a long ways, but we may not be substantially completed in 2013, and that 2014 will become the more likely substantial completion year.
So roughly a
Year or two, depending on when they get going. Yeah.
County Road 14, going from Rochester to Owatonna.
Mm-hmm.
That one overpass down there, they spent over 2 years on it,
Yeah.
you know.
They had problems on the land there, the same thing.
Well, and here, I mean, you all know, because you've seen it, you've been there, we've talked about it tonight. I mean, there's, especially on the east side, there's a lot of topography. And to make an overpass fit in that location is no small engineering feat. So there's some significant engineering going into this project to make everything kind of blend in as best it can when you build an overpass into the side of a pretty significant hill. So it's not the simplest project to build or engineer, at least in my view. They'll get it done, and they're working hard to get it done. They're working hard to make it tie in as best they can with everything else around it. But there's a lot of this going on out there. And when you're building an overpass up here to get traffic underneath it, you got to bring it down, you got to bring it in, and on both sides of 52, it's not perfectly level ground. So I don't know how you all feel about kind of this notion of a medical campus, an office environment. I've talked about maybe even the possibility of some mixed-use, higher-density residential. I think that the lay of that land is such that incorporating some mixed-use development is a reasonable market opportunity, as I said, and I think to fit it in there creatively and make things function well and look good and utilize the existing lay of the land as effectively as we can, this is probably as good an area to do it, and we'll have a project that we are pretty confident is going to happen anyway, which is the hospital. So it's a heck of a start to do that. But I think this part of the community, we should look at it a little bit differently than what's been developed out there to date. There's clearly still a lot of land out there that can accommodate uses other than complementary businesses to a hospital. There's plenty of other lands out there to do that even without annexation. There's clearly some redevelopment site potential. And I think when you look at, again, the area in gold, there's a fair amount of land up and down 52 within the existing city limits, not all of which is currently developed, much of which is, but most of that was developed under township rule years ago. And the good news is when there wasn't sewer and water out there, the sites got a little bit bigger for wells and septics, and there's still a fair amount of land area in and around those buildings that I think over time, our EDA or otherwise, will probably find themselves getting involved to kind of help put some pieces together and create some redevelopment sites even beyond this 60 acres that we're talking about here with the hospital. So I think we can make it work reasonably well together, but clearly, as we've talked before, and Bill knows this, and we've mentioned it even when Tim was on the EDA, that we're definitely on the EDA side taking a much closer look at Highway 52 and what's going on out there now that we've got kind of the things going pretty well out in the industrial park. So it's going to take some effort out there to kind of fit everything into this new interchange and these secondary roads and the utilities that were put out there and are available to serve these developments. I think we're going to definitely be involved out there to a certain degree.
Don't you think if you leave it a little loose on the zoning side and a little open, you're gonna spur more interest for the medical part or whatever you want to call it, than if you get real definite that it has to have specific uses, and you should kind of leave it kind of a blanket area, because all that has to come through the city anyway if they're going to do anything. And you can kind of fine tune it as you go along rather than specifically say we got to have this and we got to have that.
Yeah, I agree, and I think if we look at the B2 district right now, you know, the good news is it allows just about everything. The bad news is it allows just about everything. So I think if we're going to have kind of this notion of a planned development area, I'm not about dictating to the marketplace, it's got to be this much and this color and this in this location. But I think if we give kind of a more general perspective of the uses that we're desiring there, and give the basics in the zoning to give them at least some broad standards to work within, I think that's better for us, and I think it's better for the private sector because it gives them a little bit more flexibility to respond to those kind of broader parameters.
Nobody likes to take their investment money and be told what to do with it specifically, so I think we need to leave as broad as standards as we possibly can and deal with it when somebody comes up with an idea and something they want to do.
And I think again in this 60-acre area that we're talking about, I mean the other three parcels right now, the smallest of the three is about just under 2 acres, and the other two parcels are both over 3. So I've talked about in just broad parameters of having minimum lot sizes in this 60-acre area of not less than 40,000 feet. What that's going to do, it's going to give some flexibility for the investor, for the developer to come in and move things around on a larger piece. And I think it's also going to discourage to a certain degree the smaller 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, 6,000 foot developments, which are all going to be independently developed on individual lots under very specific standards. And we're going to end up with, like everyone else has ended up with along the highway, we're going to have that. Well, we've got that now, but it's in a bigger scale because there weren't public utilities out there when it was first developed, so they couldn't have the smaller lots. So I think we can have both out in that area, but I think in this 60-acre area, I think again, because of the magnitude of the hospital project itself and having the Mayo name attached to it, that is going to create some interest in those adjoining properties or parcels for either redevelopment or new development, and I think if we can keep them compatible, I think it's going to create a real nice, a nice development area in that part of the community.
So that 60 acres you're saying is besides the hospital?
Yeah, it's all together, yep.
The hospital is partially on that 60 acres?
Yep, the hospital is a majority of the 60. I think the others are, like I say, it was probably 4, 7, 9, maybe 9 or 10 acres of the 60 were not the hospital, yeah.
Okay.
So the hospital is the majority of the site, but they're not going to use all of their, say, 45 acres in round numbers, or 50 acres. They're not going to use all that 50 acres just for the hospital.
Right.
They're going to have land that could be developed in proximity, close proximity to the hospital for other uses.
So they're actually going to basically be selling that land if somebody wants to develop it.
I don't know that for sure yet. I think as we've...
I assume they're thinking of hearing aid clinics or eye clinics or I don't know, therapy centers or something like that. I assume is what they're thinking is, right?
If they decide to sell the property, clearly they'll have restrictions on use, and those restrictions on use will be businesses that are compatible to what they're trying to achieve and the image they're trying to create. So I think the uses you mentioned are the ones that would be likely prospects.
Right.
But we don't have, I don't have, and I don't want to lean on Bill, but I do because he's the president of the EDA. We don't have at the EDA, I don't have as community development director, any agreements, anything really firm with Mayo at this point with regards to development beyond the hospital. We've had conversations with them. They understand, you know, that we, working through the EDA, have an interest not just in their project, but the broader development of the Highway 52 corridor, and they've been supportive of that. But if they were really going to do something, I mean, their business is hospital and medicine. Their business isn't necessarily, you know, development and speculative investment. But they've got a piece of property that's larger than what they need specifically and exclusive for the hospital.
And I think Dave was kind of on the right track, looking more as a vision of what you'd like to see in that area. You know, but you still want to keep some of your concerns open.
Yeah, you don't want an auto body shop right next door to the hospital, I don't think. But
Right.
Well, it might have an icy winter, you know. No,
get
I'm
the car
joking.
fixed while you're in getting a cast on your arm, huh?
I think the clinic out there is going to be kind of interesting to see what happens. I mean, if we were putting out a Cabela's out there, I would know what would happen because I've seen it happen over at Owatonna. You set up a Cabela's in the middle of nowhere, and the next thing you know, you got gas stations and you got motels and Burger Kings and everything else. So it's going to be kind of interesting, I think, the old saying, if they build it, they'll come. I mean, it's going to be kind of interesting to see what follows the Mayo Clinic out there. I don't know. I think the cool part of it is that the ideal situation is I'm excited about the Casey's thing on top of the hill out here. To me, the ideal thing would be is we get the new overpass and Quick Trip wants to be out there. So a lot of this stuff is, it'll be interesting to see where it goes, and I don't know how we can kind of guide things or think about things. I don't know how we can ever project or forecast what it's going to do. But it will be interesting to watch.
And that's getting back, I think, to David's point too on the flexibility in our planning and our zoning to create a little bit of flexibility, which we really don't have now. And you all know that better than anybody because I bring you the applications all the time. So I think in this area we can loosen it up to a certain degree, but also I think the natural market and the fact that the hospital is going to be there and the fact that the hospital owns, or Mayo owns, almost all the land out there right now is a huge control. But I think we've got an opportunity to work with them because Cannon Falls is in a wonderful location for obviously medical services and what they're doing now and what they'll do in the future in this community. But again, with the accessibility to 52 and the visibility of this site has to 52 and the visibility that's going to come to it once that hospital is built, this is going to be a multi-level building. This isn't a single-story hospital on that site. It's just, I think it's going to attract interest by itself once that hospital building is built and open.
But that's not to say that the 60 acres isn't occupied by Mayo at some point in time, too.
Good.
Because they like to plan ahead, and if you see how much real estate they have taken over in Rochester, you know, it's not out of the question.
Yeah, and they have that big complex down in Phoenix, well, it's Scottsdale, I believe.
Yep.
And that, it was out in the middle of nowhere for about a year and a half, and I mean, it's a heck of a place now. And it's got every version of medical facility all the way around the, and I think they bought a lot more than 60 acres down there, but it's.
Well, I think, and again, not on this site, not with this hospital, but clearly I've had two significant developers talking with me in the last couple of years as this hospital project's kind of evolved and ultimately evolved to the site that they're gonna build on. But two fairly significant developers of multifamily residential developments, again predominantly senior, but not exclusively that, wanting again to locate in reasonable proximity to medical centers and facilities. I think we're going to see that, whether Mayo does it or Mayo does it with someone else, we're going to see that kind of interest out in that area. I mean, the other kind of interesting thing that I see on this property is, thank goodness for white roads, that we have Highway 52 here, we've got I guess the frontage road here, and then we're set back again off of the frontage road. We're not sitting right on 52. This site and this property is off to the east of Highway 52, separated in the future by, you know, the extension of County 24, and there's some topography there, and there's, you know, you get back into this location over here of the site, that's some pretty nice property back in there. You know, so I think if we go down this direction, obviously there will be a lot more conversation with the folks at Mayo, a lot more conversation with other people, but I think the lay of the land, again, is such that it creates some interesting opportunities, and if we want to foster and facilitate that a little bit, this would certainly be a way to do it.
You know, the one thing with the Mayo system is you don't know too is that if they're gonna mostly run an emergency hospital out here or a service hospital, if we become the check area and emergency area and then things get shipped to Rochester, I don't know where their development goes. If we become a central area between Rochester and the Twin Cities, then it could really expand, I would think. So that's kind of the hard part, to know what their thinking is too.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And their business, like everyone else's, will continue to evolve, and healthcare, as we all know, is an interesting business by itself and complicated, but
Well, it seems that right now, they're more along the lines where they bring patients in and do the examinations and want to get them down to Rochester, so. But I'm happy about the investment they're making here and everything, but I don't know necessarily that will be a big operating hospital here.
yeah, I'm not sure either on the hospital side of it, Leroy. I would tend to agree with you on that. The question is, are those other investments, the other medical businesses that Mayo is in right now or could be in the future, whether or not our location is something that might be attractive to them.
Right.
And I think it probably could be as we go forward. You know, they built a cancer center over in Northfield, next to the Northfield Hospital, on a site that I would argue maybe isn't even as attractive as this one. And it's those kind of things that I think will continue to evolve with Mayo, and obviously they're a significant player in the medical business, and boy,
That one is just a radiation center, isn't it?
so I think trying to work with them and keep that relationship moving forward could create some other opportunities for us. And I think that's what we're looking at on the EDA side.
Yeah, a lot of exciting things have happened here in the last 6 months with EDA. Lawrence is out there and our other projects in Gemini and now possibly the Casey's. So there's a lot of good things to help our tax base out here. It's pretty exciting.
Yep.
You trying to tell me, Leroy, that my taxes are gonna go down finally?
You never know.
I'd like to get under $6,000 if I could.
I'm too much of a, I'm not a politician, but I'm smart enough not to answer that one.
Well, I'm not hearing anyone telling me to go away with that idea yet, so if,
I think getting rid of moratorium, we should have done that 6 months ago, but that's,
that
if you want
surprised,
my
that
opinion on the
surprised me
moratorium.
from you.
I don't think we should have had it to start with, but.
I'm fine with letting it run out till the end of the year and then move on with our planning and stuff from there.
Well, I can kind of take this concept further if, unless you have major disagreements, or if you've got other ideas, let me know. You know how to get a hold of me. But it seems like something that will not only move us out of the moratorium, but I think create some interesting opportunities for us.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Do we need to make a motion to approve?
Nope,
Okay.
unless you want to make one.
Is there any other planning commission member comments?
The only one I had, Dave, was I was sitting down behind Schofields waiting for somebody today, and I looked over at our old siren that's on the poles down there. And it looks to me like it's got no wires or anything going to it
Yeah.
anymore. It looks like we're on the new system.
Yeah, it's supposed to be removed.
It is gonna be removed?
Yeah.
That was my question.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's coming yet. Cool, thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for the alley. Have you driven through my alley lately?
Yeah, what's the deal on that? How come you get to be the chosen one there?
How is that?
Are you in with Public Works now, or what?
Well, it's the first time since I've lived there that it's
Huh?
actually been all tarred,
I
so.
want to get my whole driveway done down there.
It's pretty
and I
cool,
can't
yeah.
get any-
We're all, the neighbors and everybody are very happy about our new alley, so.
Yeah.
Any other planning commission member comments?
I think that's a conflict of interest there.
Well, we were talking about it on Public Works, though, that we're slowly gonna take care of
Yep.
trouble alleys.
Any ones that are washing, they got a list of alleys that wash.
That was one of them.
And
Becca Tim's was another one.
Mine was a big one.
every year, when there's a little blacktop left at the end of the year, we're gonna try to deal with the list and knock it down and do these alleys where the washing's happening. You're just lucky this year, Bruce.
So, Dave, what's happening on the east side by my place? They've got all the utilities marked along the road on Hoffman and Oak, I think it was.
Yeah, that's for the east side, one project. You'll eventually, along with, what, 100 residents will be getting letters at some time in the future, the public hearings, you know, the whole 429 process.
'Cause is that next year's project or is that in 2014?
No, that'll be next year's project.
Okay.
We're just starting on it, so they're out there planting all their stuff.
Okay.
Panicking everybody. Right, Tim?
That's right. When I see flags in my yard, 2 feet from the house, I'm saying, what's going on here?
There
Way
goes
to
the
get to know the
vacation.
citizens of Cannon Falls, that's how we do it.
I see that.
Big progress on the library too. I'm not too wild about the color, but.
Yeah, that's quite a color, isn't it?
With that, that brings us to number 9 on the agenda, which is adjourn.
So moved.
I've got a motion by Price and a second by Longton. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.